Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and in today's video, sponsored by the makers of Call of Dragons, I want to talk about the Dragonfall matching system, which is a triumph for the state of the game. I am really hyped about this, and we have more information than we had in the prior video where I was speculating about how this would work. Now we can talk a little bit about how it's actually worked out, and let me explain. In case you haven't been following along with the videos I've been making, there's a new season in Call of Dragons. It's called Dragonfall, up on screen here. And the developers must have observed the same thing I observed and many of you in the community observed, which is that the biggest kingdoms in the game were not setting up good seasons. They were creating easy seasons, easy wins, not even getting fights in the final zone, which is the most exciting part of the game. And it's unsurprising to me anyways, but it is very surprising to them that some of those big kingdoms are starting to fall apart, because if you can't deliver your fighters fights, they're gonna leave, which means you're left with only non-fighters. But that's a bit of a tangent. I've covered that in prior videos. The developer's solution to players' inability to make good seasons is to force it on them. Okay, fine. You can't do good matchmaking in Diplo? We'll do it for you. And I think this is an elegant solution, and it fits perfectly because, as I said in my prior video, I think player-led matchmaking in Diplo will always be better, but failing players' level of sophistication and understanding of game state and prioritizing game experience over game rewards and account progression, it's important the developers step in and say, okay, we'll do this for you. And that's what's happening here. But let me explain. You queued up for this KVK, Dragonfall, and every kingdom gets classified as A, B, C, or D. A's and B's will be fighting together. C's and D's will be fighting together. And you pick who your allies will be. And then the developers pick which other group you will go and fight. So you can see here that at the A and B tier, it's 2A kingdoms and 2B kingdoms that form up a team. So we'll get matched up against two other A and B kingdoms that also formed a team together. Now, this is really important to understand because people seem to not get the way this very, very logically changes how you should approach the sort of allies you would pick. And there is one other thing I want to mention before I go a little further here, which is that there's also a Paragon realm. A Paragon realm is the three realms of the highest power. Maybe that means strength, maybe not pure power, I don't know. But there's three Paragon realms for each classification, okay? So in each class, there's three Paragon realms. So 3 A's are Paragons, 3 B's are Paragons, and I love that because Paragons cannot be together, which should theoretically prevent a situation that has happened in the past in Rise of Kingdoms, which is match not found. You form a team that's so strong, you don't get a match because you greatly outpower everybody else. So, this brings us to the thing that most people didn't seem to understand about this format, and because the BDO fam has a lot of players that are very experienced from Rise of Kingdoms, we immediately knew what an AABB or even AB system was going to mean. And it meant that you needed to do all your homework such that the moment this team up phase opened, you were ready to declare who your allies were going to be. This is an extremely obvious thing when you start to think about what happens when people get taken off the board as potential allies. You lock up good allies, and then the pool of people you can work with gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And you don't want to be the last one left holding the bag, not actually getting to pick who your allies really are because you took too long to figure out who you were going to ally with. Which means the only way you can be ready for matchmaking team up to officially open is if you already know who you might want to ally with. So we went through a very, very detailed and rigorous evaluation of who all was queuing and what their true strength is, and that gets to be our sort of secret sauce moving forward, and other kingdoms will figure it out because it's not rocket science, okay? You go in prepped to pick your allies, and I'm hyped for our allies. Now, I do want to say something very important here, which is that the one thing you really cannot do, and I think a lot of kingdoms fail to understand this, the thing you cannot do is if somebody says, do you want to ally, to turn around and say, let me get back to you on that one. Now, the reason you can't do that is because you just have to assume the other party is not prioritizing you, right? If they wanted to ally you, they'd say, hell yeah, let's do this thing. And who are you going to ally with when you have options? The people who say, why don't you wait a little bit? I got to figure stuff out. Or the person who's like, hell yeah, let's do this. Let's go, baby. You're going to ally the groups that give you the hell yeah. And it's so funny because, look, like I used to actually swing dance, which is like social dancing, okay? And if you want to meet people, dude, let me tell you, swing dancing is an amazing way. It was a very, very wholesome hobby to have. Swing dancing. Get good exercise, make friends, great time. I mention this because the idea that you would like ask someone to dance and that they would say no or what, and not even no, but like, why don't you just stand there and wait? And they just look around the room waiting to see if anybody else was going to ask them to the dance. Like it's just not a thing. It's just not a thing. It's so dumb. Like when you put a visual to like what certain kingdoms were doing when they're like, let me get back to you. It's like, bro, that is insane. Okay. It's insane. So you need to be deeply informed going into this stage where teams are ultimately formed. Okay. In order to make really good choices. And already the people who don't understand the way the system works are complaining that we made such a strong team and that we rigged the Diplo in our favor, which is a hilarious outing of their misunderstanding of reality. It's like the people who don't understand the game how it works, like they can't help but to out themselves and complain in a way that reveals how much they don't understand. And let me explain. When we were thinking about the way that we could ally for this season, we had several options. Remember, in normal Diplo, you have conversations about both sides of who is going to be allied together. Okay, normal Diplo, which generally doesn't happen in this game. Everybody comes together and they talk about the balance of the teams and they form balanced teams. Okay, but in this world, you only have control over one side of this equation, and then you get matched against some other grouping of four. Okay, in that world, you need to understand the possibility space. What is the possibility space? So if we form a strong team, the best case scenario is we get matched up against some other strong team, in which case we have a banger of a season. Maybe we win, maybe we don't, but we formed the strongest team we could with the information we had, with the people who wanted to ride or die with us. That seems like a great outcome, okay? The next possibility is that we formed the most badass team we could, and we don't get matched up against a team that's quite as strong. We have an easier season. It is what it is. We get a win. We move on with life. On to the next season. Okay? The worst potential outcome would be that we formed a strong team. Our team actually somehow ends up being too strong, and then we get no match found. In which case we have to queue up for a whole nother cycle, and we lose however many weeks of time waiting for the next pop. That would be, in my opinion, the worst case outcome, okay? If we form a strong team, and forming a strong team is the key here, because the other alternative would be that you sandbag and you form a weak team. Now, why would you form a weak team? The reason you would form a weak team is to avoid no match found, or to avoid fighting the biggest and the baddest. Now, we're not trying to avoid fighting the biggest and the baddest, and we definitely do not want no match found. But a part of the reason we're not as worried about no match found, hopefully, is that the new system they've got here for a Paragon realm should prevent teams from being too far off from each other in power. Because no sort of team can have more than one potential Paragon. So it should prevent the no match found issue, which is yet again why forming the strongest team was the unquestionable, most logical way to approach this season. Not only does it have the potential for the very best fight possible, but also the possibility of a no match found is pretty low in this situation. Could happen, but it's pretty low. Okay. Now, the alternative, as I was describing, is that you sandbag. And if you sandbag, you make your team intentionally weak. You make your team intentionally weak to either, like I was saying, avoid fighting the biggest and the baddest, which we're not trying to do. And like, it's so funny, whatever we had done, we would have been criticized for, right? Like we make a strong team, people cry because we made a strong team. If we make a weak team, people would have mocked us for making a weak team, right? It's hilarious. But if you make a weak team and you end up fighting someone really, really strong, then you could end up losing and you have no one to blame but yourself. You're the one who allied with the weaker people. You got cooked, sucks to suck. And that's not a situation we want to be in. So we definitely did not want to form a weaker team, okay, with the hopes of what people often do when they form weak teams, which is to fight some other weaker team, but they think they still outclass everybody at that tier of power level. And that would be sort of the best case outcome of a sandbag team, is that you fight someone that is, equivalent in power, but actually your punching level is just way higher. And like, your kingdom is really strong, your ally kingdoms are really weak, and you're just sort of farming KP off the other weaker enemies that you end up fighting. We didn't want that situation either, okay? So once you understand the possibility space, it becomes extremely obvious that the one and only best thing to do was to have been prepared for the Diplo, go in knowing who you want to go to the dance with, and ask them to dance. And hopefully they understand that they should just say yes, because they've done their homework, and they also know who they want to be in this with. So anyways, all that to say, I'm hyped about who we're allied with. I hope we get a tough fight. And it should be a pretty cool experience. I think this system is a huge freaking win, and we'll sort of see how it all works out. But this system so far is exceeding my expectations and prevents the one thing that the top kingdoms were all doing, which is avoiding real fights to get the easiest wins imaginable. And I don't think that is achievable anymore. I mean, it is. You just go queue for the other form of, a season, right? Go queue for the other formats. That's fine. There's a place for you to do that cheese, if that's what you want to do. So I think this is really hype. I think this is genuinely going to elevate people's level of understanding of how to approach Diplo. And it removes the side of the equation where things can be just deeply, deeply imbalanced. All right. So this is pretty cool. All in all, really, really hyped about how this went down, as I've said before. And we will find out who we're up against in a couple days. Then results. View the scenario your realm will be taking part in, and information about the other realms taking part in the same scenario. And then we enter into Brink of War. The thing I'm intrigued about is, I guess, because it's AABB, presumably, it would only make sense that every war camp has an A and a B, right? So presumably we will be in a war camp with either 286 or 81, one or the other, right? And when we look at that map again, right, like you can make arguments for this map going either way, in terms of like where you'd place allies and enemies. One possibility that, my some of the officers in Blood Fam were sort of mentioning is that it is possible that you end up being catty corner and you fight for more zones. So if one AB was here and another AB was there for your allies, right, you could fight enemy kingdoms over here. Because each war camp is about the same punching strength, you have a lot more flexibility to put them around the map. So this is possible where, like, you could fight over here, you could fight over, here, these guys fight. And then the thing is that you would fight the other kingdom, I guess, for the next zone, potentially. So the only weirdness there would be the possibility of not getting into Kingsland. But what they could do, right, is like, you fight one kingdom for the zone over here, you fight the other kingdom for the zone over here, and it is possible you have a direct entrance from your home zone into Kingsland, but that would almost sort of imply that like home zones get invaded really, really quickly, which I don't think is the case. I think this format is going to have these be safe zones. I think it's going to be like a top versus bottom. I really do. But, who knows? The reason I'm mentioning all of this is that now that we know it's AABB, that has sort of implications about each camp should be equally strong, which does mean it is possible that you would go and, battle it out against each of the other groups and then slug it out for Kingsland. GG's, man. I am hyped for this season. And I haven't been this hyped for a season in a while, and there's still so much I don't know about, the way this map is going to look and how it's going to play out. So if you enjoyed the vid, throw a like on here, consider subscribing. Look, there's going to be a bunch of people who complain and aren't happy about the fact that we were so dang organized, and this is the very first team that formed for this format, the very first time that it showed up to the game. We'll see how we do, right? We may not win, but that's, as I was saying before, like, not necessarily the point. The point is to get good, fair fights. I'm hyped for it. And the funny thing is that I genuinely feel like 95% of the disproportionate effort that happens has now already happened in locking up the team. And like the remaining 5% of influence that we have over the outcome of this season is sort of like a playing out of systems that we've already put in place. Like, BDO is already a war machine, man. Like, we already have the mechanisms in place for all the things it takes to run a kingdom, to manage, the migrations and all that stuff, right? And I'm not saying we're perfect. I'm just saying, like, that's all going to play out, and it's going to be, there's just not that much we can do to influence our punch level between sort of like now and when the fights happen. We've done the majority of the work that influences the outcome of this season, and now it all plays out, and it's going to be really interesting. And maybe 95% is like too much. Maybe it's like 80%. Maybe it's even like 60%, but like a huge amount of what you sort of hour for hour get for influence on the outcome comes from this time spent here, in my opinion. Whatever. You enjoyed the vid, throw a like on here, subscribe. You want to see my other videos talking about this topic, cards are in the end screen. The moments leading up to this one, baby. It is honestly I think this is a very well-designed, elegant solution for the problem that needed solving for this game. I am here for it. Until next time, you have fun smashing your enemies. Take care, everybody.